The Colossus of Rhodes was a giant bronze statue of the Greek God Helios, erected in the port of Rhodes, an ancient Greek city-state, around 280 BC. Constructed by the Rhodian sculptor Haris of Lindos, it was one of the tallest statues of the ancient world. It stood for only 54 years before being toppled by an earthquake, but its reputation was so immense that it was listed among the 7 wonders of the ancient world regardless. So how does Civilization VI translate this bronze giant into gameplay? In Civilization VI, the Colossus provides the following bonuses: +3 gold, +1 Great Admiral points, and +1 trade route capacity along with a free trader. To get around to explaining these bonuses, let's first go back a little to understand why the Colossus was built in the first place. During the later part of the 4th century BC, Rhodes was a mercantile republic, which was seen as a small but powerful naval force in the Aegean Sea. During that period, there was a wide conflict in the Hellenistic world regarding the successor kingdoms, which were the partitioned conquests of Alexander the Great following his early death. Rhodes maintained a careful neutrality, but this did not sit well with Antigonus Monophthalmus, who feared the Rhodians would eventually side with his rival, Ptolemy I Soter, because of their good trade relations. When Antigonus asked the Rhodians to aid him in his attack on Ptolemy, they refused. As a response, the Macedonian general ordered his son Demetrius I Poliorcetes to besiege the island. This siege, though, turned out to be quite costly. Demetrius amassed an attack force more than 6 times larger than that of the Rhodian defenders. Many tactics were used in order to capture the port city during the year-long siege, but to no avail, leading to a peace negotiation between Demetrius and the Rhodians. One of the terms of the treaty that was finalized was that all the siege engines, equipment, as well as the massive Helepolis, which was constructed just for this endeavor, would be left on the island. Much of that equipment, along with the Helepolis, was sold, and the proceeds were used to fund the construction of the Colossus, transforming the instruments of war into a monument of victory. Maybe not the most practical use of that huge amount of gold, but certainly a memorable one. Some of the weapons from the failed siege were supposedly melted down and repurposed in the statue's construction. I wonder how Demetrius felt about that. I bet it must have stunk, at least a little bit. The statue was a depiction of Helios, the Greek god of the sun. Helios was not among the most prominent deities in the wider Greek world, but he was the patron god of Rhodes, where his cult held particular importance. By constructing such an immense statue in his honor, the Rhodians would be basically trying to elevate their deity to the level of that of Zeus or Athena. The one tasked to construct this unprecedented statue was Haris of Lindos, a sculptor born in the island. We will get a bit more in depth about its construction in the later segments. So that was a brief historical background of the statue, but to actually explain the effects that the game attributes to it, we also have to examine the city-state of Rhodes during that period. The city's harbour was one of the busiest in the Aegean, which helps explain why the Rhodians were so keen to remain neutral during this time of conflict in the area. It sat at a crossroads between the Greek world, Egypt, and Anatolia, and the majority of its wealth resulted from the vast quantity of trade that passed through it. In that way, we can justify both the gold bonus and the free trade route and trader that the wonder provides the player, imagining the Colossus as something of a representation of the commercial reach of Rhodes. The Great Admiral bonus highlights another aspect of Rhodian power. Rhodes was an important trading port, but that's not where their significance ends. The island boasted a powerful and respected fleet, which it used to ensure commercial security. Strabo wrote about Rhodes at length, noting that its fleet exceeded that of anywhere else he knew. Diodorus similarly described Rhodes as the strongest sea power and the best governed city of the Greeks, mentioning that it had single-handedly taken on the task of clearing the Mediterranean of pirates on behalf of the Greek world. If these accounts are even partially accurate, then it seems pretty fair for the game to attribute Great Admiral points to the civilization that was able to construct the Colossus. The wonder requires the shipbuilding technology. We could treat this as an extension of the aforementioned Rhodian naval supremacy. Rhodes' identity as a city-state centered around the sea, and having a large and powerful fleet is a big part of that. The Colossus seems like a very fitting physical monument to express the relationship between the city-state's prosperity and the sea. The wonder must be built on coast, adjacent to land and the harbour. This is a pretty self-explanatory requirement that is basically a one-to-one representation of the Colossus's real-world placement. According to accounts of the time, the Colossus was built in the port of Rhodes, but its precise location remains unknown. Some historians have also argued that the Colossus could not have been built directly in the port of Rhodes, as it seems unlikely that the Rhodians would be okay with a statue as large as this, taking so much valuable space. What we do know is that his famous pose, that with its leg on separate sides of the port, is most probably a fabrication, as there is no evidence of it in any written form.
At Rhodes was set up a colossus of 70 cubits high, representing the sun. The artist expended as much bronze in it as seemed likely to create a dearth in the mines.
The in-game quote comes from a short ancient text called the Seven Sights of the World, attributed to Philo of Byzantium, though that attribution is disputed. Scholars believe the text was more likely written by a different, later author, possibly as late as the 4th or 5th century AD, who either adopted the name or was confused with the earlier Philo. It's interesting how many things are disputed about the history of the Colossus. We know that an earthquake knocked it down 54 or 56 years after its construction, and that its fallen remains were a popular attraction for over 800 years, but that is pretty much where the certainties end. Colossus's actual location, its posture, and the eventual fate of its remains are all a matter of debate to this day, with very few and vague sources to go on from. What is certain though is that the image of the Colossus has stuck in the cultural zeitgeist, a testament to how powerfully the statue captured the imagination of the world even in its brief existence. It's no coincidence that the Statue of Liberty, one of the most recognizable wonders in the world, shares many similarities with the ancient Colossus of Rhodes, even being described as the new Colossus in its inscription. So overall I have to say that I'm a little bit underwhelmed about the bonuses that Civ gives to the Colossus. Almost all of them are basically derived from the fact that Rhodes was a seafaring merchant city-state, so the effects end up feeling a bit generic. It's not that they don't fit though. As stated, we don't really know that much about the Colossus, so making the wonder be more related to the things we do know about the people that built it does make sense. If we treat the Colossus as being a representation of Rhodes, as the economical and mercantile powerhouse of its heyday, the design is perfectly appropriate.